Hello, today I'm going to be reading the Ballad of Birmingham, and it's by Dudley Randall. And this poem is on the bombing of a church in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. Mother dear, may I go downtown instead of out to play and march the streets of Birmingham in a freedom march today? No, baby, no, you may not go, for those dogs are fierce and wild, and the clubs and hoses, guns and jails aren't good for a little child. But, Mother, I won't be alone. Other children will go with me and march the streets of Birmingham to make our country free. No, baby, no, you may not go, for I fear those guns will fire. But you may go to the church instead and sing in the children's choir. She has combed and brushed her hair. She has combed and brushed her night dark hair, and bathed rose petals sweet, and drawn white gloves on her small brown hands, and white shoes on her feet. The mother smiled to know her child was in the sacred place, but that smile was the last smile to come upon her face. For when she heard the explosion, her eyes grew wet and wild. She raced through the streets of Birmingham, calling for her child. She clawed through bits of glass and brick, then lifted out a shoe. Oh, here's the shoe my baby wore, but baby, where are you? So this poem was written in 1969, and the bombing was in 1963, so it was a bit after the bombing happened. But obviously this is what the author was writing the poem about, which it said at the beginning. It was about a bombing of a church in Birmingham, Alabama. And I had heard of the bombing before, but I did some research to refresh my memory. And the bombing, it was by members of the KKK, and they ended up putting explosives in this African American Baptist church, and while many people were attending before the church service, the explosions went off. Most people were able to get away, but there were 4 people who were killed, and those 4 people, all of them were young girls who were killed. And so I think Dudley Randall, because Dudley Randall is African American, I think that he was wanting to bring light to this bombing. And yes, people know that like 4 young girls were killed, but I think when you're able to tell a story like this, and it's looking in the life of the mother and the child, and you're able to feel the emotion of the mother and the child, it makes it more relatable for people, and they're able to like dig deeper into like what people are feeling because of this, like because it was a family that got ripped apart. It was 4 families and 4 young girls who didn't deserve to die that young. So, in the beginning of the poem, the girl is asking if she could go to march the streets of Birmingham for a freedom march. And this was in the 60s, so it was a civil rights movement, which were typically dangerous at that time. And she was wanting to do that instead of going out to play. So I think that it's kind of showing a bit of innocence, which is, I think, one of the main themes of this poem, is that this girl was wanting to make her country free. She was wanting to help instead of going out to play like what a young child should be doing. I think there was a bit of irony in the poem because the mother, not that she should have wanted to go out and march, but it shouldn't have been the daughter, because she is young, and that's just not what young children do. And she was the one that was wanting to go out and do this freedom march, and her mother was the one who didn't want to. It's kind of like they switched roles in a sort. And then also I think there's a bit of irony because, I mean, churches are seen as like a sacred and safe place, and they still are to this day. And obviously the mom was thinking this would be a sacred and safe place, definitely a lot safer than these marches, unlike the marches that were dangerous at that time. But as you can see in the poem, like the very last 2 stanzas, she heard the explosions and she went to the church, and all she was able to find was the shoe of her daughter. So I think that also makes people relate, because like, goes back to what I was saying about the innocence, is she was at the church and she was staying away from the violence, and she was the one that ended up getting killed because of all of it. And then I didn't notice this in my first time reading it, but you don't know what race these characters are in the poem, but it says that, so after she told her that she couldn't go to the marches, she told her she could go sing in the choir. It's talking about her getting ready and brushing her night dark hair. It says she'd drawn white gloves on her small brown hands. And this is the first time in the poem that you're able to see what race the girl is. And I thought it was interesting that the author did put in her small brown hands to let you know that she was African American and she was attending that Baptist church. And then it also said that the white shoes on her feet. And I think the author included this because you're able to look into their lives and see how she was getting ready for church. She was dressing nice, but then at the end it brings it back because that's the only thing her mother was able to find in the remains of the church was her shoe, but she wasn't even able to find her daughter. And so, yeah, that's pretty sad to look at when that's the only thing you can find of your daughter. And it was saying that that's the, it says she smiled to know her child was in the sacred place, which should have been a sacred place, but it also says that that smile was the last smile to come upon her face. So right then you knew something was going to happen. And in the end, the girl did die. And this is just giving you a look on one of the 4 girls that died in the bombing. And then just a few things in the poem I noticed was some literary devices was repetition. And I didn't see this like throughout the poem, but in the beginning of the poem, I thought it was interesting that in lines 3 and 5 and 11 and 13, 3 and 5, it says, march the streets of Birmingham. And then it says, no, baby, no, you may not go. And then later on in lines 11 and 13, it says, march the streets of Birmingham again. And then the mother again says, no, baby, no, you may not go. And I think this repetition is just showing how the daughter really did want to go march the streets of Birmingham to help her country. And the repetition of no, baby, no, you may not go, I think that was just showing the readers how the mother really was scared and she really was against her child going to this because, yes, it was dangerous, there was violence, and I liked the fact that they repeated that. I talked about irony earlier, and then a metaphor that I saw was in lines 17 and 18, and it was just, she has combed and brushed her night dark hair and bathed rose petals sweet. And I think that whole stanza, it says, and drawn white gloves onto her small brown hands and white shoes on her feet. It's also imagery, but I also like that it said night dark hair, which also went along with the small brown hands. And then I think the overall theme of this poem was innocence, like I talked about earlier, violence against race at that time in the 1960s, and overall, like, the death of the child. This poem, it has 8 stanzas, and each stanza is 4 lines each. The rhyme scheme is A, B, C, B, which is like only the 2nd and 4th line rhyme together, but that happens in every single stanza throughout the poem. So it keeps like a steady rhyme scheme. And then rhythm, the title of the poem is Ballad of Birmingham, and this poem is a ballad meter. So it's like a repetition throughout the poem of the stressed and unstressed lines. And so, like, an example would be, and march the streets of Birmingham in a freedom march today. So you can kind of hear like the da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. And then that's all I have. Thank you for watching.